We have been spending the last month or so talking through the idea of how it's so amazing that we can have this close personal relationship with God, that we don't need a mediator, that we don't have to be perfect and have everything figured out in order to go to God. But at the same time, if we allow that close personal relationship to become overly casual, it can really impact us in a negative way. All right, and so we are calling this series that we've been in, Keeping It Casual. All right, now this is kind of as a nod towards actually what we want to avoid. All right, that we don't want to get overly casual in this. So the first week, we focused on essentially not domesticating the God of the universe and putting him into this little box of like, oh, he's just our best friend who's along for the ride in my life. And whenever I kind of need something, then Jesus, take the wheel. Otherwise, I'm driving my life, and he's just kind of along for the ride. That's not a healthy outlook on our relationship with God. The second week was if we view God incorrectly, if we kind of have that overly casual view of him, we probably don't have the right view of ourselves and how we should be living. He has called us to be holy like he is holy. And it's okay that we have a come-as-you-are approach to God, but we don't want to stay that way either. Then last week was how should all of this impact the relationships that we have? And we talked about not necessarily abandoning all of the relationships that we had before finding Jesus, but that in certain seasons, we maybe need to lessen the influence that some of those relationships have on us. That our lives should be moving closer to God, and we hope to bring others along with us as we do that, but we need to be wise and make sure that our closest relationships aren't ones that are actually going to pull us away from him. So we've looked at how we view God, how we view ourselves, and how we view the people around us, which leaves us in one more spot that I want to go today to kind of close out the series. How do others view us? Now, it's not actually going to go exactly where that sounds like it will, specifically how other people might judge us. All right? And so, all right, let's jump in for today. I want us to be ready, and even just kind of right now, I'm going to continue on here. Lots of times we'll stop and we'll pray right now, but here's what I want to do. I want to give us a moment just to kind of say, okay, where am I at? Where's my heart? Where's my mindset? Maybe you're here for the very first time today. Maybe you're here for the kids' Christmas program, or you're just visiting. Something that we love to do is challenge kind of right now at this moment of the service and say, listen, it's not enough to walk through the doors of a church. Just because you walk through the doors of a church doesn't really mean a whole lot. What matters is where's our heart at? Where's our mindset? Where's our attitude? And are we saying, God, I want what you have for me? Because I believe that God has something for every single one of us that's here this morning. The question is, are we kind of ready for that? Are we open to that? Are we looking for that? And so I want to just challenge you right now to kind of do a quick self-assessment and say, okay, if there's things I need to kind of push out of my mind and forget about, I'm going to do that. Or maybe instead of pushing those out of your mind and forgetting about them, you're saying, you know what? I'm going to bring this to you right now, God, and kind of lay this at your feet and say, God, this is yours. Because I want to be able to focus in on what you have. All right? And so let's do this. Let's continue. We've had, each week, we've had a bit of a line that we have looked at in this series. A statement that people will often make. And we have used that as like a jumping off point into these messages. So the first week, we had the classic line that you'll hear people say, it's not religion, it's a relationship. Right? Now, each one of these lines, they're great at the heart, but if you take them the wrong way or you take them to the extreme, it might be a little bit bad. And so it isn't religion, it's a relationship. The second week, the line was, come as you are. We love that we can come as we are, but we don't want to stay there. The third week was this, Jesus was a friend of sinners. Very accurate line. Does that mean that that's exactly how we should live in all seasons of our life? Well, yes, but again, what are we constituting friend and what level of influence and relationship? And those are things that we can't just take that simple line at face value, and we need to be willing to kind of dive into that. All right, today's line, the thing that I've heard people say is this: Only God can judge me. Right? You ever heard somebody say this? Maybe you've said it. Right? Only God can judge me. We are going to talk about judging today, but not necessarily in the way that you might think. All right? I've preached messages before, and they are greatly needed, of how we often fall into a place of judging other people, how Christians can be too judgmental of others, how it can lead to gossip and all sorts of negative things. But today isn't about judging in the sense of us doing the judging and it being a negative thing. Today is about other people judging us and actually how that might be a good thing. So when people make this statement, only God can judge me, they might be a little right. But it depends on what context they're saying it in. If we're talking about some type of final judgment, well, then this statement is accurate. Scripture talks about how there will be a time where God's ultimate justice will come about, and that happens through a judgment. So if that is what someone is referencing, then yes, only God can judge you. But that usually isn't what people are meaning when they say that, at least in my experience. Or maybe instead they're meaning that only God can judge their heart. And again, maybe that's mostly accurate. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, the prophet Samuel is going to anoint a new king because God has rejected Saul, and Samuel is looking at all these brothers, the sons of Jesse, and he's like looking at, surely this must be the next king, surely this must, and all these things, and God kind of makes this statement. This is verse 7, it says, "Don't judge by his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So maybe people say this, and they say, only God can judge me, and they mean that only God can judge their heart. But there's two problems with that. The first is, I don't think that's usually, again, what people mean when they say this statement. And secondly, we're actually told that in many ways, we kind of can see someone's heart. In Proverbs 4:23, it says this, "Guard your heart above all else, for it determines the course of your life." Now, this is New Living Translation. This is what we often read on Sunday mornings. It's very easy to understand, and so we like using this, but there's moments where the translation kind of comes up a little short. This verse in the NIV says it this way, "Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it." That all your actions, everything you do, everything you say, all of that, it's all flowing out of your heart. Jesus says it this way in his Sermon on the Mount. He says, "A good tree produces good fruit, and a bad tree produces bad fruit." Skip down a few verses. Yes, just as you can identify a tree by its fruit, so you can identify people by their actions. The book of James says that faith without works is dead. The Apostle Paul keeps going with the fruit analogy, all right? Like all this to say, even though you and I cannot look at somebody and completely know their heart, somebody cannot look at us and completely know our heart, we can really tell what's going on based off of their actions. Like to say that you can't have any idea where someone's heart is at really would be counter-biblical from what we see. And so if someone's saying this line, only God can judge me, and they're saying it about like, well, you don't know my heart. Okay, well, at some point here, your actions, your words, whatever you're doing, it's got to line up. Like it is revealing your heart. All right? But ultimately, I don't think that, honestly, any of this really matters in this conversation. And that's because I don't think that's why people use this line that when they say only God can judge me. Because many of the times I've heard someone use that line, honestly, it's shortly after they've done something really stupid and people are judging them. Right? Like, think back to maybe the moments you've said that and you're like, only God can judge me. But inside, you're like judging yourself hardcore because you're like, that was so dumb. I can't believe I just did that. Oh, I was way in the wrong in this spot. Like whatever it might be. So ultimately, I don't think any of those other explanations really matter that much. Now, of course, there might be other times as well, but okay, let's dive into this. And last week's message is going to be crucial in today's topic. If you missed it, that's okay. I'm going to sum it up, and this is why last week matters. There are some people in your life that if they judge you, you shouldn't really care about it. All right? Like, and if there's hopefully other people in your life that if they're judging you, you should care. Right? Like there's different categories of friends. Is this a friend that's pulling you closer towards God? Like when it comes to judgment being passed, the judge who's passing the judgment really matters. That's super important. And sometimes we don't stop and think about that. Maybe we tend to be more of what people refer to as a people pleaser, right? And you're just like everybody. You care too much about what everybody thinks, and you want to constantly be pleasing the people around you. But last week we said that our closest, deepest, most influential relationships, people that we should care if they're judging us, they should be people who are drawing us closer to Jesus. That our most honest, transparent, vulnerable relationships should be people who are pursuing Jesus. I want to read something that the Apostle Paul says to the church in Corinth, all right? This is 1 Corinthians chapter 5. He says this, "It isn't my responsibility to judge outsiders, but it certainly is your responsibility to judge those inside the church who are sinning. God will judge those on the outside, but as the scriptures say, you must remove the evil person from among you." Okay, now, obviously that phrase right there, you must remove the evil person from among, okay, this is not talking about like, okay, every time you sin, all right, you're kicked out of this church. Get out of here. We can't be associated. That's not this at all, right? Like, as you go through what Paul's saying here, there's something more, and the context of this makes it very clear. When Paul's talking about judging, and this isn't some type of final judgment. He isn't talking about randomly guessing about where someone's heart is at. He's talking about what actions do you see in their lives. Are they living in a God-honoring way? Do their actions line up with the kingdom of God and the way that we are called to live? The specific context in this chapter is that there was a guy in the church in Corinth who was living in super obvious sexual sin. And it was known by everybody, and nobody was doing anything about it. They were just acting like it's completely fine. That's the context of this. Paul isn't saying if some random person on the street is living a life that's contrary to God, you should go yell at them. That's not what he's saying. He isn't saying, go down to like Vegas on the strip or go to Mardi Gras and walk around with a sandwich board, that says the end is near and ring a bell and start yelling at people. Like, that's not what Paul's saying here. That's not it at all. Please don't do that. If you do that in Long Prairie, I'm going to pretend like I don't know you at all. And if someone asks if you go to our church, I may even lie and just say no. Because I don't want to be, like, that's not what we're called to do. And yet you see this. There's people that are like doing this, not a huge group, but it's a loud enough group that they give a lot of people a really bad name, right? Like we've probably seen videos of this. What Paul is saying here is that inside your faith community, inside the group that says, I am a Christian and I'm doing my best to live for Jesus, if someone is blatantly living in a way that doesn't honor God, you should have a close enough and honest enough, dare I say loving enough relationship to point it out to them. Maybe they don't realize it. Maybe they're new at this. Maybe they're completely unaware of how their actions are impacting the people around them. Maybe they're just being selfish. Maybe there's just sort of being a jerk and living in a way that they should know better. It really doesn't matter what the reason is. It not only would be good to say something, Paul actually says you have a responsibility to do it. Okay, wow, that sounds like a lot of conflict inside of a community, right? Some of you guys are just like, this is going to get nasty. This is going to be really hard. I don't know if I want to go to church. Like, some people are sitting here thinking, I love this because there's someone here. I've wanted to tell them for a long time what I don't like about them. And my pastor's giving me permission right now. Like, can we go back to greeting time? I have a few people I want to go greet. Okay, no. That's also not what this is. All right? A couple reasons. We need to understand the difference between not liking with how someone's doing or even agreeing with their choices and someone living contrary to how the kingdom of God is. There are people that are going to live differently from you, make choices differently, things that you don't like, but it actually isn't contrary to God's kingdom. It's just contrary to your kingdom. All right? And you need to get over that. So that's not what we're talking about here. And Paul's talking to a group that in many ways is going to be smaller and closer connected than what this group is. I'm sure that we've all been there where someone told us something we probably needed to hear, but honestly, it was the wrong person that passed the message on. And so then we did not care. In fact, we rejected it, and we really were like, I don't want to hear that. Simply because it was the wrong person that was sharing it. This isn't about just saying your piece. The hope is that there's correction. And in order for true correction to happen, almost always there needs to be some type of relationship. And honestly, deep relationship. All right, so if you're someone who takes notes, write this down, all right? Reprimand without relationship results in rebellion. If you go to reprimand somebody, you go to correct somebody, you bring something to them, but you don't have the right relationship with them, you cannot expect that that's actually going to be a correction. Correction means they have received what you've said and they've made a change. If you don't have relationship, you can't expect to see that. Instead, what you're going to see is someone actually push back against it and move the other way. This is why last week's message is so crucial. That your closest, most honest relationships are people who are pursuing Jesus, because then it allows you to sit in a place where this can happen. Because actually the biggest reason why I'm not giving everyone permission to go confront a bunch of other people is because that isn't our focus today. This isn't about us judging or confronting others. It is about others judging and confronting us. And that's an idea that I would guess most of us aren't as excited about. Right? Maybe you got excited when I said, okay, we're going to talk about judging, and you're like, great, I'm awesome at this. It's a skill. I put it on a resume. Okay, no, this is about us receiving it from other people. My hope is that you would reach a place when we not only are okay with receiving this from other people, but that we would actually want it. That we would see this as a potential positive in our life. But how we view it will be very dependent on the people who are passing the judgment. A close friend that we know that they want the best for us and they want us moving closer to God, we shouldn't mind that judging. Now, people might think about the passage that Jesus says in his Sermon on the Mount. He says this, he says, "Do not judge others, and you will not be judged. For you will not be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged." Now, when most of us read that or hear that, we probably have a pretty negative connotation around the word judge, like it's a bad thing. Well, it isn't inherently bad. It can be if it's done unfairly. It can be if it's unwelcome. It can be unwelcomed if done by the wrong person. It can be unhelpful if done in the wrong way or at the wrong time. But judging is simply deciding what is just. It is pointing out what is wrong and what is right. And that actually can be really helpful for us. I want to reread this passage, but I'm going to specifically change the initial word judge there. And I want us to think about this not in a negative way. When you read this, try and remove whatever negative idea you have surrounding this verse and think that he's actually encouraging us in this moment. Okay, so what if instead it said this: if you do not point out right and wrong to others, then no one will point out right and wrong to you. For you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. If I want people to help me know what's right and wrong, then am I willing to help somebody else know what's right and wrong? Does that feel a little different there? Does that feel a little less negative? I think sometimes our issue is that we just approach this in such a negative way. Jesus was speaking this to a culture that was overly critical, where all the power of what was right and wrong were in the hands of the religious leaders. And they were not always fair and were often misguided in what they thought the right way to follow the law actually was. So he is speaking to them, and he's basically telling them, like, cut this out. Now, Paul, earlier, who says we have a responsibility to judge, Jesus is talking to this, like, extreme on this group. They are overly judging. They're doing it in an unfair way. Paul is talking to a group on the other side. They aren't correcting somebody at all. They aren't saying what's right and wrong. And that's where Paul comes back and says, listen, you have a responsibility to do this. So you can see it really does matter, like, what is this situation that's going on? And actually, at the end of this whole passage that Jesus says, where he says, don't judge others, they're going to judge you like this. He actually says this, if you remember, remove the plank from your own eye so that you can see well enough to remove the speck from your neighbor's eye. He doesn't say just drop it. He actually, at the end of this, when he goes full circle, he still comes back to saying, this is something you should do. Just do it in the right way. Quit thinking that you're better than everybody else, even though you have a plank in your own eye. Be willing to accept somebody else helping you get the plank out so that you can go and help somebody else with a speck in their eye. All right, like, judging is not bad when it's done in the proper context. And the proper context of judging is this: in close relationships between people who their desire is to honor Jesus and live according to his kingdom. That's the proper context of judging inside of a faith community. And when judging is done correctly in its right context, we simply call it by a different name. And that's accountability. We all know that accountability is needed, right? Like, that's something that should be happening in our life. When judging is done correctly, it simply is accountability. And accountability is something we all need. We need others to come alongside of us and help us keep moving in the right direction. But the people you want doing that are people who have you have given permission to do this in your life because you know that they love you and they want God's best for you. Okay, not necessarily what you think is best for you. They want God's best for you. Because sometimes what we think is best for ourselves actually isn't. And we need those friends to come along and point that out. We want to grow and become more like Jesus. How do we do that? By continually removing the pieces of us that don't reflect him. When we first start this walk, usually it's pretty easy to see those parts that don't reflect Jesus. And we know the steps that we need to take and the things that we need to be working on. But honestly, the further you get down the road in this journey, the harder it gets. Because now the things that we need to deal with tend to be rooted deeper inside of us. And they are more subtle. And they are pieces that we have chosen to ignore for decades. Right? Maybe you come to Jesus and you're like, okay, yep, I know all these surfacey things I got to get rid of. But what about those deep things that you've been convinced are just part of who you are? But they aren't, and you need to deal with them. But you just aren't ready. You need somebody. And so despite our desires, we often are just blind to the areas that we really need to grow in. And that's where a close friend, a close mentor, a close relationship can come alongside of us and point that out. An easy example is this. Like, you might think you got all your ducks in a row and you're just a great person, right? If I wanted to know what area of your life you are weak in, things that you need to get better at, do you want to know who I would ask? I wouldn't ask you. If you're married, I'd ask your spouse. If you're a parent, I'd ask your kids. If you're a boss, I'd ask your employees. If you're a sibling, I'd ask your brother or sister. And here's the thing. It will not take them long to answer. Things that you would agonize over and question, I don't know, what do I need to get better at? Oh, give me a week to think about this. You need 7 days. They don't even need 7 seconds. All right? They're going to know right away, oh, where do they need to get better? I can tell you. Those that are closest to us can see the things that we're blind to. But here's the game changer in all of this. Here's the piece that will determine whether this is successful in your life or not. And it's not whether you can handle the feedback or not. It's whether you welcome it or not. Because here's the thing. Even if you can't handle it, even if you hear something that you think is like too much and you're kind of like breaking down, if your mindset is that you are looking for this, that you actually do want this, and that it comes from someone you respect and you love, then if you can't fully handle it, they're still going to walk with you through it. One of the benefits of our multi-site model of this church, if you didn't know this, it's one church, 4 locations. One of the benefits is this. Pastor Corey in Sauk Center, part of his job as like our executive pastor is checking in with all the staff. All the locations, all the pastors. He gets together usually monthly with each of us, and it's individually, and we sit down and we talk about personal life. We talk about family, physical health, mental health, kids, spouse. We talk about our ministry and our own areas that we're in charge of and people that we're meeting with and that we're leading, personal goals, vision. We talk about the church as a whole and beyond just the areas that we lead. But then we've been instructed and we've been taught to do something at the end of this meeting, and we ask the question, what things in my life are you seeing that I need to grow in? What areas am I weak? How can I get better at this? And it gives Corey an open door to share with us the things that honestly we need to hear. If he has to bring this up on his own, that's going to be way harder for him and way harder for us to hear, right? If you're sitting in a meeting and somebody comes up and just says, hey, you know what? We got to have a hard conversation. Here's what I need to say. Your guard's going to be up. You're going to get defensive. But if you walk in and you say, okay, hey, what do you see? Here's my life. What do I need to work on? How can I get better? That gives them an open door. By asking the question, you are expecting and, dare I say, even wanting that feedback, and that changes everything. Now, here's the thing. You might think that you're getting feedback from the people around you. But most people will only share about 70 to 80% of what they're actually thinking and noticing and what you need to hear. They hold back 20 to 30% because that is the part that is hardest for you to hear, and they don't want to hurt you. The problem with that is that 20 to 30% that they're holding back is the chunk of feedback that is actually going to help you grow the most, and you need to hear more than anything else. But they won't share that unless you kind of explicitly ask for it. You almost have to give permission for them to share. If someone's giving feedback, at the end of it, you even need to say, is that everything? Or is there something else that you're holding back right now because you're worried about how I'm going to handle it? And in that moment, you have a huge opportunity to take a step forward in your walk with Christ and to grow. This is why we need the people around us to be judging us, pointing out what is right and wrong. It's why we need the people around us and the closest, deepest, most honest, vulnerable relationships to be with people who love Jesus and are moving us in this direction. All right, why don't we stand across this place? As I was writing last week and talking about how do we pick the closest relationships to us, like this is why it's so difficult, and why the tension of last week of saying, listen, if you begin to follow Jesus, that does not mean that you're cutting out a bunch of people out of your life necessarily. That's not what we are looking for. It's why we talk about, okay, who has the most influence in your life? And does that influence, is that coming from people that are moving in the same direction you are? If you have been like honest and said, I want to move closer to Jesus, and it has to start there. If you're not in that spot, a lot of this like isn't going to make sense in the same way. But if you are in that spot and you're saying, I want to move closer to Jesus, then the people that are most influential in your life, they have the biggest voice in your life, should also be moving in that same direction. Because then when it comes to feedback and when it comes to the people judging you, you should care deeply about what they think. Now, it doesn't mean they're always right. We have the whole story of Job where he's sitting there and he's this righteous man and he has to listen to his friends over and over and over, sit there and say how you must have screwed up. If all this is happening in your life, there must be something wrong. Like his friends don't always get it right. And that's why Job keeps coming back and saying, God, I want to have an audience with you because they don't have this right. But at least they're trying to move in the right direction. They're pointing it towards Jesus. They're doing all of this. This whole series really has been focused on the idea of holiness. The God we serve, that we love, that we surrender to, is holy. Our life is supposed to reflect Him. We are called to pursue holiness because He is holy. And as we pursue that, it will begin to shape our lives, including the people we surround ourselves with. And when we are surrounded with the right people, we can welcome and even appreciate judgment in our life. Because if we serve a holy and just God, then we have to want judgment. Our world is fallen and broken, and there is injustice that is happening all around us. And we probably want things to be just. We want things to be fair. We want things to be put right. Injustice can only turn into justice when a good and perfect judge passes judgment. And God will do that. And that judgment isn't something to be scared of. It's good. It's putting things right. But unfortunately, each one of us is attributing to the injustice in this world in our own way. As much as we want to see it as something on the outside and all this corruption, we are attributing to it. And so we want people to help point those things out in us so we can become more just. We can become more in alignment with God's kingdom. We need accountability. We need to not just be open to it. We need to welcome it, seek it, ask for it. If we want to serve a just and holy God, we must have judgment as part of our life. Here's what I want to do. I want to give us an opportunity this morning where maybe you're here today and you're saying, okay, you know what? I don't think I've actually even made that decision to say that I want to pursue Jesus. But maybe things in your life just haven't been going the right way. Maybe you feel like there's a lot more injustice in your life than what there is in other places. And I want to encourage you and say, listen, like, as we bring our life into alignment with God's kingdom, it doesn't mean that everything's going to be perfect. It doesn't mean that everything's going to go the way we want it to, because we still live in a fallen and broken world. But as we begin to live with justice as something that we are seeking after, more often than not, you begin to see a little bit more justice in the world immediately around you as well. And so if we're willing to do this, I would love for us just close our eyes just for a moment here. For one, it can help remove some distractions. For two, it can just kind of create a little bit of privacy here. And if you're here this morning and you'd say, you know what, I don't think I've made that decision, but maybe you've tried this in your own strength a lot. Maybe you've tried this even with all sorts of different things. You've tried A, B, C, D, and it just isn't working. And maybe this morning you're feeling something drawing you towards God. I'm not even necessarily saying that what you have to do is completely surrender everything. I think at some point we have to make that decision. But maybe this morning, and I want to start us here. If you're here and you'd say, you know what, I think I need to move closer towards God. And each person's going to know what that means. Maybe that does mean completely surrendering. Maybe you're just beginning to kind of open up a little bit and saying, God, I want to trust you more. If that's you this morning, would you just slip your hand up and say, I want to begin to move closer towards God? Yep. Yeah. Okay, thank you. You can put hands down. I think in our lives, we try, and we put in so much effort. And God is just sitting there saying, hey, listen, like that, it's not about all this effort. I just need you to come to me. And actually, I need you to stop trying. I need you to just surrender. I need you to just lay things down. Stop trying to be in control. Because the reality is, for a lot of us, we have tried everything to be in control of our life, and you just can't. At the end of the day, you cannot control everything. But there's one person who can. And so we put our life in his hands. And we say, God, I'm going to trust you. And again, that doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect. That doesn't mean everything's going to go the way we want. That's what we're moving towards. We're going to talk about that next week, actually. The Christmas season, the Advent season. What does this mean? What is the tension that we should feel? And I think that's actually really significant for us. But today, we just begin that process and we say, God, I want to trust you. I'm going to close this in prayer. If you raised your hand today, I want to encourage you with this. I would share that with somebody close to you. You could share that with me. You could share that with Pastor Aaron. Because I wish that sometimes, I wish we could do this on our own. I'm actually really glad we can't. But I wish we could, because so many people, that's how they try. They try to walk this out on their own. And I'm just going to tell you, you need community. It doesn't even have to be this church. Okay, I'm not trying to say that just to get you to come to church here. But you need a faith community who's going to challenge you, encourage you, love you, be there when things are hard, call things right and wrong in your life when you make stupid decisions, but do it in a loving way. Like, this has to be done in community. God, I thank you for this room, this group of people, this community. God, I pray that we would continue to just seek after you. God, I pray that as we pursue you, Lord, that as we pursue your holiness, Lord, not in a holier than thou, not in an arrogant type way, but God, we want to just be more like you. We want to reflect you more and more. God, we want to see your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. Lord, and we know that your church, that your people, that we are your plan A in accomplishing that right now in this season. Lord, until that day when Jesus comes and everything is made right, Lord, we are in this in-between, this already but not yet, that we are waiting for that day. But God, we see your kingdom break through in moments. We see your kingdom break through in things that we do. God, I pray that you would continue to work through us. God, that you would use us, you would guide us, you would speak to us. God, I pray that this Christmas season would be life-changing right now in the here and now. But God, also eternity-changing for so many of us. Jesus, we ask all of these things, Lord, in your name. Amen.